Welcome to the Romania River channel and my first impressions of Willy-Nilly Knight, a action game with RPG elements developed and published by Double Dice Games on Steam on the 18th of May 2017 in early access. It's currently priced around 15 euros or 15 US dollars, basically putting an equal sign there. Not too sure about GBP, but if it's equal there, it's certainly not worth that price, but I'll get to that a wee bit later. And the game itself is, well, to a certain degree reminiscent visually of, for example, Baldur's Gate, but with more cartoonish graphics and better looking overall. It is highly story focused to the point where I felt quite railroaded in my time spent with the game to do things in a very specific way. This is why I call it a action game with RPG elements, or action/RPG, because a real RPG, or at least one classic RPG, would give you a fair degree of liberty in terms of finding solutions to problems. In this game, it's more or less bash square peg into square hole, or not at all. I've tried, it doesn't work out too well. The game itself, in terms of feature set, is decent. It's basically where you'd expect a 15 to 20 US dollar game to be at. But to be honest, overall, the general feel I get for the game is more of a introduction to the RPG genre than a game you can go to when you have something like the original trilogy of Mass Effect behind you, or Dragon Age 1 and 2, or games like that. I'm not even gonna mention Pillars of Eternity or Baldur's Gate or such, because the comparison between those games and this one would be cruel in terms of freedom and in terms of overall RPG-ness. There are RPG elements and there is a certain level of character building, but everything seems simplified. So to a large degree, if you are an RPG veteran, you're not going to get much satisfaction out of this game unless the story clicks with you. And the story, yeah, it's quite interesting. But before I get way too deep into talking in the main menu screen, let's actually delve a bit into the options, which are basic to say the least, but if I'm not mistaken, the game's recommended GPU is a 680 GTX, which is about 2012, 2013 levels of graphical horsepower. The CPU was around Sandy Bridge i5 levels for recommended, and on my Haswell Xeon 123 V3 and Fury Nitro, I could probably run 3 instances of this game and not actually have to sweat that badly at the same time in combat. Otherwise, decent amount of customization here and there in terms of audio, and I do recommend giving a glance over here because, for example, the music is something around here to begin with, which is quite noticeable, as you can imagine. But that's really just a nitpick, and this is all only for languages. Game being in early access, it'll evolve, and I've actually checked since May they've been refining more or less the visual input of the game. Before, in version 1.0, not 1.0.8 at the current time, for example, weapons equipped would not have a visual difference on your character model. They would look exactly the same. Now they are actually different. Armors still don't actually show any differences, but 15 US dollar game, you can't really expect much, especially in early access. I honestly hope they don't actually go into 2025 once they launch, because unless they open up the game severely in terms of freedom, no. In 2025 you're basically talking about Pillars of Eternity on sale level, and at that point it's a slaughter. But the game itself, in terms of story, as I said, if it clicks with you, is quite interesting. It has a Arthurian bent to it, and I have played quite a bit of it in terms of overall progression. In total, I've played about 7 hours, which doesn't sound a lot, especially for me who likes to spend 10, 20, sometimes even 40 hours on a game before doing a first impressions. But with this game, the 15 to, well, I say 15 to 20, the current 15 euros or 15 US dollar price tag is right at the cusp of the 1 hour per 1 euro slash US dollar ratio I like to keep. If you're having fun for the exact amount of time you've paid for the game, you are basically coming out much better than, for example, going to a theater and listening to the guy in front of you talking. Now, the game, besides the storyline, which is Arthurian, Arthurian inspiration, at the current time it doesn't have an intro cinematic, so just loading up will probably give you guys a good idea. Basically, you start off waking up in a forest. You're basically a modern day kid, I think between 12 and 15 years old, which is coincidentally around the age I'd suggest playing this game, because story-wise, at 27 years old, I'm not that impressed with the overall flow of it. But at 12 or 15, I would have been quite amused and quite interested in how things progress. Basically, you wake up in a forest, and you move a couple of paces, and this chick runs up to you and like, "Oh my god, goblins are chasing me. Help me. You're named Arthur, she's named Guinevere." Yeah, not much there. There's a certain plot that starts developing about evil in the kingdom and how shit went. Well, I promised myself I'd keep this PG-13, but well. About stuff happening in the kingdom going steadily worse and worse over time. I'm trying to keep things more or less spoiler-free in the main area, because the main appeal of this game will be the storyline. And as I said, hopefully they'll open it up so the game will be more replayable, because at the current time, not that replayable. One of the funnier things they actually included, which kind of got to me personally as an adult, is the fact they actually love their references. Like, for example, I went over here and I was like, why does that guy, Corn, they actually put in the Joker? Well, poker in this game. Yeah, most names are mangled, so the copyright doesn't exactly trigger and the poor developers get bent over. Like, for example, this guy, he's missing his leg and his name is Twert. For anybody who's played Diablo 2, you should know what Wert's leg is and what the secret cow level is. Yeah, that's Ray from, Ray, a character inspired by Ray from The Force Awakens, who, if I'm not mistaken, was, kind of looks like her too from the movie. Granted, the character model in-game is not representative of this, but as far as I can tell, the developers are on their first game, so I'm being a bit more lenient. Still, the nice touches here and there, and considering the poker / Joker actually looks the part, I suspect this is more a case of we're working on the character model to actually look like this caricature of Rey. She's basically looking for her sword hilt, Jendai. And yes, the character being from the modern era, from our world, basically gets all the references, which is at times actually kind of hilarious. I had a chuckle or two with it. And to be honest, I found myself progressing the storyline more to get to these guys and get their particular ending, so to say. Because, for example, with Rey, I'm just gonna spoiler that a bit. Jendai satisfied, here we go. They really are kind of playing with fire, though. Though I don't think anybody, even Disney, would actually get them for this tongue-in-cheek type stuff. Sorry about the organ donor in the background. There's always one. I've not figured out who this guy is supposed to be, though. I really don't know that reference. It is one, I'm pretty sure. This guy's I think his name was Misk in Baldur's Gate, and yes, he is looking for his little hamster. Now, in terms of the game itself proper, there's the loot mechanic. You collect items of varying qualities. Everything's more or less a straight upgrade you can get from vendors. There's loot from time to time you can get from bosses that you fight, like this, for example. Bosses themselves, if you're not equal level to them, are pretty much impossible. If you're one level above them, they're piss easy. Yeah, the difficulty curves all over the place, basically, and you will smack into walls up until you get your full party. Trust me on that. The quest mechanics have certain triggers, like for example, after a certain point you discover a well, kind of a foreseeable twist for anybody who's used to story, well, evolved RPG stories. You kind of see it coming from a mile away, and then you're like, okay, how do I get the next area? Next area being over here in the Dragon Mount. Well, short story is you have to come back here. Wait. Stop glitching out, please, Adriel. Short story is you have to come back here, which you can do via simply clicking on the global map. You have two maps. Locational, which is basically to guide yourself, and global, where you can fast travel from any location on the local map to the entrances of the respective areas, which is, thank God, a very good thing, because otherwise the game would be very, very annoying. Imagine traveling from there all the way up to here. It will be about 10-15 minutes of just walking, and the pathing AI is not good in this game at the current time. Early access it may be, but basically the AI gets lost and stuck a lot. Like for example, let's say you want to go over here. Let's see where they get stuck. I think they got stuck over, yes, they got stuck here. Basically can't trust the pathing AI to find its way around the town without a pretty good degree of guidance. Basically stick to short hops. Waypoints in this regard would be a good idea to implement, but I have not seen them even mentioned in plans or mentioned in any way in the game, so no. Besides that, besides the difficulty curve spiking like hell and back, the progression of the characters themselves seems to be quite speedy in terms of, not speedy. Basically, more modern RPGs will have you going from 1 to 50 or 1 to 60, you know, stuff like that. In this one, it seems to be closer, I believe, to 1 to 20, like the traditional D&D or others. Currently, Arthur and Guinevere are level 11. These guys are level 10. Yes, there's different leveling rates depending on when you get the respective companions. It's not that bad of a deal, but you have to be careful in fights with them, because, for example, Arthur could be level 12, this guy could be level 11. And if the boss is level, let's say, 13, Arthur could survive a smack, but Cedric would fall over dead. It's that big of a gulf level to level. So anybody who doesn't have old school RPG experience or has gotten his ass handed to him in modern recreations of that sort of experience will be surprised by that quite severely. In this regard, this is why I say this is a good introduction to more, no, and let me put it this way, a game to introduce people with no RPG experience to RPGs. It's more linear, it's more brutal, it's not that elaborate in terms of solutions, which could be a bit more easy to deal with if you're not used to having to think outside the box. Like for example, if you're a shooter heavy player, and especially if you're a young one. No, that's not relying on tropes, but whatever. Now, the chest itself. Some of these are kind of amusing. That one actually had me chuckling. Now, in terms of level ups, press the plus, pretty much like other RPGs. This is your basic skill set. Each character has their own. Currently there's only Arthur to select. There's no customization of Arthur beyond currently weapon and shield, possibly armor in the future, but the character himself is fixed. And the companion choices are only these three at the current time. I don't know if they're gonna add any more, considering the achievement that the Steam Steam itself has triggered when I got Idril, which is the last companion chronologically you get, for Full House, which is for all companions. Now, select one of these, whichever one you want. Each one gives you some, either an ability or a passive increase in something or another. It's basically very simplistic, not many things hidden behind calculations, so to say. It's more or less straightforward. The problem I see here is that once you level this up, you have to also level up your stats, which requires another press of the plus. This in itself is a bit annoying because you should be able to, press the plus once, get this screen, then have, let's say, a tab down here or something that lets you switch this skills and lets you do that. As you can see, the Arthur being the knight, i.e. tank type, his bonuses in terms of stat growth is in strength and vitality. Dexterity also benefits him because it increases physical criticality, i.e. the odds of getting a critical strike with any one hit, and that is quite important considering Arthur himself is not really a damage dealer. Guinevere, being a mage, is more towards that side, but if anything even remotely sneezes at her, she either loses 3/4 of her health or all of it and falls over. Same thing kind of goes with Cedric and Idril. Basically the game really is role based, which again is more towards the simplicity and makes it more accessible to people coming to RPGs for the first time and really don't want to have to deal with hybrid classes and that sort of stuff. It's basically this guy tanks, this guy damages a lot at close quarters, and these two do damage otherwise. Idril is more into the range damage and debuffs, while Guinevere is range damage and ranged healing, and group heal as well. Now, some of the items you get from bosses can change your party's survivability quite significantly. Like for example, this gives a hell of a lot of health extra, and this as well if I'm not mistaken, which makes bosses quite important to actually deal with. And they also usually block one of the side quests, and for example Griffin armor I didn't get from a boss, I got from one of the side quests. Side quests giving sometimes, well actually what I experienced so far, most of the times currency, but sometimes, very rarely, it gives out a very good, unique or rare item. So yeah, worth doing. Aside from that, the character leveling, game itself, so on. Now I'm gonna check. First enter cast off, and I'm going to show you guys how the combat looks, because game itself outside the combat is real time. In combat it is turn-based, which in my opinion is quite good because it's easier to control the flow of battle, but in certain degrees it's also kind of annoying. Actually, I did one small mistake there. I would want to actually show you guys a small trick when playing this game, in case you're one of my younger viewers. Before entering combat, you do have the option of triggering your abilities. So when you enter combat, you already have the ability triggered, and it lasts for the amount of turns it's supposed to last for 4, but I misclicked there for a bit. Combat, as I said, turn-based. Basically you want certain skills always active, your ranged and melee DPS more or less behind the tank as safe as possible, because otherwise they're gonna get a lot of hell. At least up until you manage to launch off a taunt that catches all of the enemies in its area of effect, because if you don't, one of them is gonna decide to attack something that's a bit too soft, and things go bad. Trust me, it had it happen way too often. This is what happens when you over level, by the way. Not much difficulty. I'm at the current level 10 and these guys are level 7. There's a boss over there. I will actually show you guys how the battle goes with that guy. It's only a couple of more fights. I believe these guys and some cobras at the end. Hell, I won't even trigger the shield on Arthur to show you guys how much of a difference levels make in this game. Without the shield spell or ability, he takes double the damage basically. The ranged considerations in combat are quite a useful thing to have in terms of gameplay depth, but it can also be quite annoying at times. And there are certain fights which you get prompted to or become available before you're actually leveled up sufficiently to deal with them. This, in my opinion, is quite a flaw in the game because it can make for some very frustrating fights. And the camera angles themselves are quite poor at times. Like this, for example, I would like the ability to actually control the camera a wee bit, or have a couple of predetermined camera angles to switch between, so I can get an idea what the hell I'm doing half the time. Granted, these types of battles are rare where something's blocking your view, but they do happen and it is worth mentioning. Come on, Gwen, don't miss. Come on. As you can see, the battle is quite easy. Quite easy indeed. When you only have 2 characters, or when your level is insufficient for the respective area, you will know it quite a bit. The first boss I had to deal with was painful to a significant degree, because I only had Arthur and Gwen, and basically I was fighting 3 mobs, 2 trash mobs as MMO players would put it, and the boss himself. And it was very difficult to keep up DPS and keep Arthur alive, considering he didn't even have more than 200 health, where now he has 700 plus, thanks to items and other stuff. That's why I say the general combat can be a bit annoying. Once you learn how to deal with things though, it becomes quite a bit easier. Because you learn the flow of things and you basically learn, okay, I got beaten to a pulp. It isn't RNGs that bent me over, it was basically my inability to do enough damage, i.e. my insufficient level. To a certain degree this is quite poor design in my opinion, because you should have options to deal with certain situations, particularly when they're basically progression blocking you like is possible in this game. That first boss was basically jamming up the works, and it took me about 20 minutes of attempts, because battles usually don't last that long, either you keel over or they keel over quickly, to get through it. And trust me when I say, when you're in that position, things are really not fun. The loot system itself, basically, you don't usually get anything but ingredients which you can use to craft potions and other stuff, which is an option in this game, but currently there's no crafting of armors, shields, and so on, which is a quite conspicuous lack in my opinion. And from bosses you do get items from time to time. Let's see what we get from this guy. Trigger it, and let's go. Because this guy is not that low level, and he's quite dangerous even if the disparity is significant. Focus on the trash first. Basic rule of RPGs, take care of the trash so you don't have superfluous DPS on the field that could do a nasty amount of damage to you. Ah, shouldn't have moved there. Technically she should be safe, technically. So should this guy. Hit. Good. Good, good, good. Can you hit from there? No, you cannot. Relatively easy, but if this guy was level 9 and I was level 9 with him, it would be a hellishly more difficult experience. Or with 3 characters instead of 4, the lack of DPS would be quite a bit more significant. See what the lack of shield does, and the shield's timed so that you have one turn in which you have to basically eat damage. Kind of a bit of a poor choice there, because it kind of forces your hand to a certain degree, and there he goes. In more difficult fights, or fights where you're fighting enemies with a superior level, yeah, there's the Griffin armor that I was using on him. On that load that's a bit farther ahead. As you can see, the difference is quite significant in terms of tanking potential now. Granted, you'll still kill over if he fights a level 12 or 13. That said, I'm gonna also show you guys quickly what a standard zone looks like. Like for example the swamp. Everything tends to be a bit linear in terms of design as well. Like for example here, you move up this way, and well, actually the progression of the zone itself is supposed to be you head this way, get a trigger here, head back to town, come back with the item you need, then go up this way. As I said, it's quite linear in terms of progression. I, being me, head up this way first, thinking, oh, there's something here, very interesting. No, for that area to be accessible, you need to get the respective quest. And the quest itself there is where you get Idril, which is your last companion. So yeah, overall the game itself at 15 euros, as I said, only if it's basically, or no, 15 euros or 15 US dollars, only if you're you want to get the RPG genre and you want something that will teach you how hard it can be, but it has a fixed, linear and very simplistic solution. Yeah, this will be for you. If you're a veteran of RPGs, only on sale, or only if you, well, only on sale and if the story actually intrigues you, or you really like the whole poker, Ren, Jendai stuff, i.e. the references tongue-in-cheek so hard you actually get a cheek piercing that way. Yeah, it would be interesting. For me personally, I spent 7 hours, got, if the map, overland map is to be believed, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 out of 5, 6, 7. So a little over 50% of the way through the game in 6 to 7 hours. And to be honest, only the references kind of amuse me, and I could probably get those off YouTube. It's not fun for me personally, but I can see who it could be fun for. Thank you for watching, or more precisely surviving up until this point, because gods know the editing's kinda interesting and my voice has a melodic tone to it. If you like what you saw, feel free to hit the subscribe button, like button. It does help out the statistics of the channel, gets more visible, you know, stuff like that. And to be honest, at one point I would like to actually make this a job so I can do better content with better quality, more games, more coverage, you know, stuff like that. Take care.